So now that I have put those images in your mind, let me explain why I think Washington should be worried. We saw in Jordan's documentary yesterday that we heard Congressman Wolf earlier today. There is no doubt that the Christians are the most persecuted of all faiths around the world. So, India is not the only country. If so, but India is joining the League of Nations that are persecuting Christians in an unacceptable way. So, my question is, why should Washington worry about Christian persecution in India? Or the Christians in India, or the church in India? So in the early 90s, I used to go around in Washington telling people how bad the situation was developing for Christians, not only in India, but also in many other countries. People in authority, usually in the policy-making arena, used to give me a patient hearing. They would even sympathize with me. Sometimes their sympathy is genuine. Then they will say something like this. They will say, we're going to pray for you. Nothing wrong in prayer, but I came to realize that they are getting very satisfied with their prayer and did not feel like they need to do anything about it. Sometimes it became an excuse for them to not do something about it. But lately, though, I was happy to note that the current administration, partly forced by people like our own Frank Wolf through his legislation, were open to helping the Christian victims as long as the perpetrators of violence are Muslims, because that fits a narrative. Even now, our president seems to think the Hindus won't hurt a soul. They are, after all, non-violent vegetarians. They don't even eat meat. They don't believe in hurting another soul. They just do yoga in their free time. Yes. So whatever you are saying about them is true. They won't kill a Christian. The president is absolutely right. The Hindus do not. But what people miss to see is there is such a thing called political Hindu extremism, like there is political Islamic extremism. Even there is extremism in Buddhism. So India has become the largest violator of religious freedom in terms of sheer number of attacks on Christians and other religious faiths. The attacks may not end in loss of life, because if a person is killed, it becomes a noise, it becomes a news, it's flashed all over the world. So the target, the strategy is don't kill them. Do everything you can. Make their life miserable, but don't kill them. Make no mistake, though, the humiliation, the harassment, the pain, the suffering is real for the hundreds of victims every single day. So the question is, why should America worry about India? What is America's interest? What are the stakes for the United States? Because I talk about why the future of the church in India is important to America's interest, allow me to recall some historical facts. Dr. Fu talked about China. No, I'm not going to talk about China now, but we need to understand something about what happened with China. Sometimes it makes us uncomfortable to be told our mistakes. Nevertheless, understanding our mistakes is also the first step to realize that we shouldn't be making them again. Our failed policies and misplaced priorities in China over the last 40 or 50 years brought us to where we are in Asia today. A former Secretary of State, under an embattled president, thought it would be a splendid idea in his limited experience to create an alliance for what seemed like America's global interest in Asia. An impoverished third world nation in the name of communism was struggling to feed itself until this man threw a lifeline to a communist revolution to survive. Forget what they are doing to the Christians or Uyghurs and the Falun Gong today. Today, the country of China is challenging America's primacy in all imaginable spheres. I'm not here to second-guess anyone, but it would not be fair if I did not mention that there were voices that cautioned us against such half-baked, short-sighted, unintelligent policy driven by people who did not understand how the Chinese Communist Party thinks and operates. Even after Tiananmen Square massacre, the leading hope of the world, America, chose to remain largely muted. We failed to do a course correction. Instead, their prescription was more goodies to Chinese Communist Party. They lobbied for the most favored nation status. How many people remember the MFN, the three-letter words, MFN? So they were even willing to give rocket technologies to make the Chinese Communist Party in good humor, just to show them that don't worry about what we think in America. Those diplomats and scholars even argued very convincingly that America will have no leverage to influence the future of China if we speak against the Tiananmen massacre, or if we threaten to pull out of trade agreements. They said China will not take America's criticism lightly, and they will cut off our trade negotiations. They argued it will hurt American consumer and our pocketbook, and we caved in. Another prime example is Pakistan. It is true that there was a tremendous refugee problem and human suffering across Pakistani border as a result of the election of Dr. Najibullah in Afghanistan in 1987. I was in high school, I remember those days. Suddenly, Pakistan became an important country for America's national security interest in that part of the world. We thought we needed Pakistan. So some people argued that the only way to get Pakistan to help us, we must ignore what Pakistan was doing to her own citizens. We all wanted to willingly ignore Pakistan's epic slide into an abysmal state of no return. We may have even funded it. Once again, experts came to Washington and argued what happens in Pakistan to her citizens is its internal domestic matter. We are not here to police Pakistan, they argued. We should turn a blind eye to what they do to their own Christian population because we do not want to upset the leadership of the country. Our goal was not to protect the Christians in Pakistan, they argued. If I agreed with that misguided policy then, I will have no moral authority today to talk about the plight of the Hindus, the Christians, and the Ahmadis in Pakistan. I invoke China and Pakistan here today for a reason. We are using the same failed arguments and justifications over and over. We sure are making the same argument in India today. We sure know it will end how. It will end well for neither the Christians in India nor for the national interest of the United States across the Indian Ocean corridor. Yes, we made several mistakes in the past, but does that justify making more and more? We need a long-term vision, a long-term policy based on America's own and not just the values, but also of our national interest. The Old Testament, the book of Proverbs says that the nations perish for lack of vision. Where there is no vision, people perish, it says. When the leaders lack vision, people perish, and the future of nations are compromised. Thank God for the people, a few people like Frank Wolf, who had a vision. He saw what was coming when it was not even fashionable to talk about religion or religious freedom or Christian faith on Capitol Hill. Personally, one senator, I wouldn't name him here, told me sometime I will never forget, something that I will never forget. At that time, I was active with a group called the Policy Institute for Religion and State, After Saddam was deposed, we visited, a group of people visited Baghdad, met with the Chaldean and other religious groups, the Yazidis and others, and we came up with a plan and presented it to this particular chairman of a subcommittee. But this senator told me, your plan for Iraq makes a lot of sense. It is much needed. But you know what? I cannot support you, or I cannot help it, because your organization has religion in its title. I say this because it was in this environment Frank Wolf wrote a law that forced America to take a hard look at our own policies and thrust issues of violence against Christians as a necessary component of our foreign policy thinking. It took some vision and a lot of guts too. With China and Pakistan, we acted on misguided policies. We followed our short-term compulsions and not on the values we cherish. The result is what we see in front of us, in front of our own eyes today. India is sliding down a black hole right in front of our eyes from where it could never come back. But today, once again, we have the same failed arguments to justify a policy towards India, while we all know very well how it will end. Today, people are arguing in the committee rooms and the national security meetings that India is an important trading partner. We need India to neutralize China. We need India to deal with Afghanistan and Pakistan. Oh, there is another good one. India is a democracy. By the way, holding too many elections does not qualify a country to be a democracy. Even Saddam Hussein used to have regular elections in Iraq. We are reluctant to out India for what she is doing to the 2,000-year-old Christian church there. We are shamelessly buying our talking points, their talking points. They claim that the burning of churches, the killing of nuns, the pastors, and the members by the members of the ruling Hindu party is nothing but a few isolated, sporadic law and order crimes, and not policy or the design of the ruling party. Indian diplomats are dispatched to defend those points. Now, we have the same forces that threatened the church in India almost 1,200 years ago are threatening it once again, but we are talking about selling military hardware and refueling rights for our planes at the cost of the survival of the very church in India with over 120 million followers. Unfortunately, some officials in the U.S. administration and a couple of commissioners that the USERF argue that we should not talk about India in what India is doing to the Christians. They argue India will walk away from important negotiations such as refueling agreements. So, if India goes down the path it has chosen now, it is a matter of when and not if. This artificially put together nation called the Republic of India will disintegrate into many smaller countries, and it will happen, and when it happens, it will be 10, 15, or 20 years too late to say, geez, we were wrong once again. I say this in my conclusion. Remember those images that you saw earlier. If you want to stop that from turning into a full-scale bloodbath, like it has in Nigeria, we better wise up. When India begins to disintegrate, even if we don't care what will happen to the 2,000-year-old church there, maybe we should worry about what will happen to the interests of the United States along the Indian Ocean corridor. Thank you.